doing right now.
Yeah, you're just feeding into their claims about you being a witch.
Right. Like, well, you're not going to take us all on unless you are a witch, and then this is totally justified. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So Richard tries another tactic. He asks one of the men how his wife and his kids are doing, to try and remind them, like, hey, you know me. I'm not a bad guy. But it backfires. And John, the guy who's speaking for this group, ends up charging Richard.
And Richard cuts his axe handle 2 inches above his hand and tells him, take another step and your head follows. There was a couple things here that made me like, what? Because, first of all, it never says anything about the axe head. The only thing that's mentioned in that little chunk is the axe handle. It says the axe handle flies across the clearing or whatever. And I just thought it was weird because they were never like, oh, the axe head flew over there. Like, in my head, this dude was charging him with just a chunk of wood. Which I'm sure he wasn't. I'm sure it's intended that the head of it was an axe. That's how he knew it was an axe handle. I don't know. It was just weird phrasing there, I thought. And also, I thought it was a little bit weird that nobody was like, how's he a witch? My first question would be, what's your problem? Why are you calling him a fucking witch?
Right. You mean, like, why didn't that happen right away?
Right.
Instead of after this little scuffle first.
Right. Instead of being all weird and, like, having Kaylin defend them and then Richard, I would have been like, all right, let's get this settled. What did I do that's causing you to be all pissy with me right now?
Right. And instead, we're left with this guy charging Richard. He's got his sword now to his throat. John responds then by saying, you can't stop us. We're here to save our families. And Richard, being the guy he is, he's still trying to talk this mob down. And he knows all these guys. So he's like, look, Frank, didn't Zed give your sick wife a potion to make her better? And Bill, didn't Zed tell you when it was going to rain so you could harvest all your crops? And John, fucking John, the guy who just tried to kill me, didn't Zed find your lost daughter? And he said, Zed hasn't hurt any of you, and he's helped most of you. And there's one guy in the back who's like, yeah, let's cut his fucking head off, guy from the water boy, who's like, only a witch could do that. And he just pisses off the mob again.
At this point, I would probably look at him and be like, okay, real talk. Why is it so bad? I get we all came here to be away from magic. That's the whole thing about Westland. But those are all good things. So even if he is magic, like, deal with it. It's not that big of a deal. It's a very weird thing to be like, yeah, only a witch could do those things. Those are all good things, guys. Why are you complaining? And you all indirectly use magic. So are you witches too?
Right. So at this point, Zed calls a timeout. He points to Kaylin. He actually puts his finger on her nose and he's like, too little. Then he goes over to Richard, does the same thing and says, too much. And then he points to himself and basically says, hey, watch this.
It's a little Goldilocks moment there.
Right. Yes, exactly. And he turns to the mob and asks if they were intending on calling him a woman. And then he explains that a woman is a witch. And if it's a man, then it's called a warlock.
If you're going to call me a derogatory term, at least get it right.
Right. So then Zed asks them what they think a warlock can do. And he actually gives them time to spout off at the mouth here.
And list a whole bunch of really terrible, scary shit that a warlock could do.
Right. And some of them really weren't that scary either.
Yeah, they weren't all.
They're just kind of silly.
Yeah.
They're just making stuff up at this point. And he's like, wow, well, you all must be really brave to stand up to a warlock all by yourselves, which kind of makes them start doubting what they're doing there in the first place.
Yeah.
And as all of this happens, he starts to lecture them as to why it would be a really, really stupid idea to stand up to a warlock who could do all of those horrible and some silly things.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's all powerful and they're just a bunch of dudes, and it would be really easy for a real warlock to fuck all of them up.
Yeah. You want to die? Because, a warlock could make you die.
Yeah. Is that what you want to do here today? You want to die?
So at this point, Zed has turned the tables, and these guys are afraid. They just want to go home now. They're done.
Yeah, they realize they fucked up bad.
And Zed says, you came here to kill me, and that's not going to go unpunished. I'm going to take away the thing you cherish the most.
So one guy, and I like to picture it as the same guy who hollered out from the back, my money is gone. And Zed's like, nah, dig a little deeper. And slowly but surely, all of the men start grabbing at their crotches in a panic. Freaking the fuck out. They're jumping up and down, crying, grabbing at themselves, running in little circles and asking for help, falling on the ground and sobbing. And then Zed just basically screams at him, now get the fuck out of here. Sorry, I'm just filled with pure joy. He makes all of their junks disappear.
All their dicks are gone.
No more dicks.
I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. This is something I've remembered. I don't remember everything from the series. I forget a lot. It's been a long time since I've read the whole thing. This is something that's never left my mind that Zed did. This is one of the reasons that I love that character, because he could have done a whole bunch of really bad shit to these people. But instead he just, snapped their penises away and made them all crying messes.
I always kind of felt that maybe he left the actual dick and just made the balls disappear. Because I could picture Zed saying something like, you got a lot of stones for a guy with no balls, and just stare him down until the guy's like, wait, what? Oh my God.
I feel like guys wouldn't care as much, though, if their balls were gone.
I disagree.
I mean, I don't have them.
I feel if any of the members are missing, there is a problem.
You need the whole party?
Yeah.
At the table?
Yes.
Okay.
They go together. Anything that's not there, that's supposed to be there, it's going to be a big deal.
Twig and berry, Frank and beans.
Exactly. They're all part of the same stew. And this is why I love Zed so much. These guys are panicking. Full on 100% panic. And he turns around and he looks at Richard and Kaylin, and the impish grin returns.
And he winks at him. I also think it's funny because it has mentioned that Richard and Kaylin have been sitting back there for most of this interaction with the big mob, just bored as fuck. And you gotta imagine that as soon as this happened, they were like, oh, this just got interesting. You got popcorn?
Zed's putting on a show. Zed then asks, what's this? Do you guys think that I've been too harsh? And they're like, yeah. Then, much like a grandparent, he makes them tell him the lesson that they've learned and then beg for mercy. Like, oh, well, I suppose I could put things back the way they were. As long as you tell everybody that magic doesn't make a person bad, and then you go home to your families and you tell them that you almost made a terrible mistake tonight, and you tell them what you learned as well.
Can you imagine going back to your wife and being like, you know how we were going to go kill the witch? He's actually a warlock and he stole my penis for a while.
And then immediately grabbing myself again and like, are they back? Are they back?
And being like, magic's not all bad, except it was kind of bad tonight.
Except it's the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Right?
So I'm never going near it again, ever.
Yeah, I'm not going to fuck with that guy. Okay? If you want to kill him, Barb, you go kill him. I'm going to stay here and drink my coffee.
So they all start to kind of take off slowly at first. And they're like, all right, maybe he's going to let us go and we're all going to live. And then Zed goes, just one more thing, fellas. And they all freeze in terror. As you would. He goes, pick up your shit. I'm an old man and I could trip over your weapons and stuff. And, you know, he could break a hip.
No, I thought that was really funny too. He was like, no, you're going to clean your stuff up, okay? You're not going to leave my yard a mess. Kaylin asked Zed if he really made their manhood vanish. And he's like, no, it was just a trick. It was there the whole time. Which makes the scene even funnier. Because he was just fucking with them. He probably could have made their manhood disappear. But he didn't. He was just having fun.
And he calls them idiots. And Richard's like, for a second there, I thought it was like real magic. To which Zed stops him and he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Sometimes a really good trick is real magic. And it doesn't matter how it comes about, but it's the results that matter.
Just so everyone knows, Nate likes to do magic.
I dabble.
So he knows all about making a good trick magic. And this kind of makes me think of that because magic is just tricks.
Yeah, like when our friends James and Chantel come over with their kids, they have 2 twin boys, and I'll pull a deck of cards out and I'll show them a couple of tricks. And their faces just light up, but at the same time, they have no idea how I do what I do. And I mean, it's nothing too complicated. It's pretty simple cardistry. If you look it up on YouTube, you'd be able to figure it out. But to them, at least for a minute, that's real. There's no doubt in their mind that that card just vanished into thin air. It's pretty cool. I enjoy it.
I mean, I can't figure out most of them until you tell me. I'm not even going to lie. I'm an adult. I'm a fully grown adult, and I don't fucking know.
Well, I'm still working on making dicks disappear, but, there's time.
Yeah.
There's time.
Yeah, focus that brain up. You'll
Yep.
be fine. Now, he does say that this whole situation was a stew stirred by a hidden hand. And it is a mistake to use less force than needed to finish a job. Because by doing so, you give an enemy a second chance. And that's the lesson that Zed wants him to learn from this. Dark and Rawl encouraged these guys to come over somehow. And it was not enough force, and it's going to give these guys a second chance.
Yeah, so Richard is kind of like, well, as per the rule that Zed just taught us, why would Dark and Rawl stir up this group of men in the first place if he didn't have the wherewithal to do anything? And Zed kind of goes, well, he probably just doesn't have sufficient power in this land yet. But at any rate, it was a mistake because it only warned us that he was coming. And to that, Richard goes, holy fuck, he's coming. We have to leave right now. He says, Dark and Rawl is smart enough to know that we're all here right now together, congratulating each other on surviving the angry mob. It wasn't a mistake, guys. It was a fucking trick.
I love that Zed's sitting here this whole time like, what? You would almost expect Zed to have been like, as soon as Richard was like, we gotta go, to be like, oh yeah, you're right. But Zed kind of for like a couple minutes is confused. He's like, what are you talking about, man? Like,
especially after teaching them all this lesson.
Well, and the fact that Zed said that he can't go after Dark and Rawl himself. And Kaylin confirms that. Kaylin's like, yeah, this is exactly Dark and Rawl's style. He doesn't want to do things in a manner you expect. He wouldn't have just come in here guns blazing. He's gonna fuck with your brain a little bit and sneak up behind you.
Speaking of fucking with people's brains, Zed at this point says, my rock. I can't leave without my rock. And he goes running up the hill, robes and hair flying all over the place. Crazy old man taking off into the darkness. And so Richard and Kaylin head inside. Richard grabs his pack and kind of does a quick recon of what he wants to bring and what he's going to leave behind, and decides, fuck it. Everything I really need is in my pack. I'm just going to take that. Let's go. And as he gets outside, he asks Zed, did you get your rock? And the last time we saw his rock, it was huge. It's big enough for him to stand on.
Naked.
Naked. Yes, he was naked. But the question was, how did Richard expect him to get this rock in the first place? It says Richard knows he can't lift it. Like, what was he expecting Zed to do
Yeah, I really don't know. Like, did he think he was going to levitate that shit their whole way?
Maybe. I guess Richard was probably in too big of